Hey everyone, it's the Doomdog. We recently finished another Let's Play on the channel. As always, that means it's time for another video review. Today we are looking at Fear 2 Project Origin for the PC, PlayStation 3, and Xbox 360. For our Let's Play, we played the PC version. Let's talk about it. The first Fear is held in extremely high regard. It is hailed by critics and fans alike as one of the better shooters ever made. To this day, it is used as a go-to example of how to do enemy AI right. These are sentiments that I strongly agree with. If you've seen my Let's Play and review of the game, you know how much I love it. Making a sequel to a game held in such high regard has got to be stressful. It is not an easy task even for the most talented developer. Making a game that lives up to the original is a task that ranges from very difficult to impossible. It is a task that Monolith was faced with when making Fear 2 Project Origin. How did they do? Let's find out. This project had problems from straight out of the gate. Thanks to some weird contract problems, the game didn't start development as Fear 2. Monolith did not have the rights to the name when they started development, but they did have the rights to the characters. They held a contest for its name, and Project Origin was the winner. Partway through development, they won back the rights to the name and were able to name it Fear 2. It's weird. In Fear 2 Project Origin, you play as a new character named Michael Beckett. Much like Point Man in the first game, he is a silent protagonist. He is a member of a Delta Force team called Dark Signal. Along with his squad, the group is sent in to find and retrieve Genevieve Armistead, one of the higher-ups at Armacan. Fear 2 actually begins shortly before the ending of the first game. Beckett does not have slow-mo powers that Point Man did when the game begins. After the opening mission, you do witness the ending of the first game, and it is cool to get to see this from a very different angle, and to know that there were at least some survivors of what happened. The first Fear had two expansion packs called Extraction Point and Perseus Mandate. Those two parts of the Fear story were stripped from the canon with this game, however. This continues the story of the first game and completely ignores the two expansion packs. In doing so, it does create two different timelines. A canon with Fear 2 and 3, and a non-canon one with Extraction Point and Perseus Mandate. Fear 2 piles on the lore thick and fast as you play through this game. There are numerous twists and turns as you uncover more and more of what Armacan has been up to over the course of the game. There is a lot for anyone into the story and lore, and a lot of it is interesting. Some of it deals with Michael and his own history as well. While a silent protagonist, he is not a complete blank slate. This is not what you are going to remember this game's story for, though. What you will remember the most about this game's story is its ending. I will not spoil it here, as I do not go through the story step by step to critique them in my quicker and more concise reviews like this, but the ending of this game is sure to leave an impact on you. The ending is so weird and beyond fucked up that I cannot even tell you if it will be a positive impact or not, but you won't soon forget it. Personally, I like the additional lore and all the secret projects that fold into each other that Armacan has done and you uncover over the course of the game. It kind of makes it a shame then that the only thing that most people will remember is how Fear 2 ends. That is the kind of impact that this game has. Fear 2 does have a DLC pack as well. It's called Fear 2 Reborn. It tells a simple story of the ghost of Paxton Fettel from the first game trying to draw a single replica soldier to him. It is simple, but it provides a little more closure and additional context to what happens in Fear 3. It is also intense and a lot of fun. The weird thing about this game's story, though, is that it does not involve the namesake at all. If you remember the first game, then you know that FEAR stood for First Encounter Assault Recon, and it was a government agency that dealt with supernatural threats. Well, they are not in this game. At all. And this is just weird when you realize it. How does Fear 2 Project Origin look? Well, it certainly does look like a 2009 game. It looks like about the most 2009 game ever made. It is certainly not on the low end of the spectrum for its time. It looks pretty good. There are some decent amount of details in the environment, and the lighting is generally pretty good too. It is not a bad looking game at all. I have heard it suggested that this game does not look as good as the first game did, and this is simply not true. The character models are more detailed and more realistic with higher polygon counts than the first game, and the environments have more detail throughout them. At a first glance, you can tell that this game has years of advancements packed into it, as it did come out 4 years after the first game did. What I think the problem is the lighting. The lighting in this game is warmer and more natural, but the lighting in the first game does leave a much stronger immediate impression on the player. The first game was made when a lot of developers were really playing with what could be done with lighting. We got artistically beautiful lighting in games like the first Fear, Doom 3, and Quake 4. As a result, you remember that much more than the more realistic but often more static lighting of this game. While this game does look good, I do have one gripe with it. When you enter slow-mo, enemies are outlined in light, and it feels unnecessary to me. I do not know why they chose to do this when the first game did not. Furthermore, when this game goes into its horror sections, it does tend to blur the visuals. This makes it more difficult to make out exactly what is going on. Overall, though, this is a decent looking game still. It is not going to blow you away, but it is over a decade old. That is forgivable. For the time, it was a pretty good looking game, and it has aged fairly well. I do think that the first game aged better than this one because of all that it does with lighting and fog and particle effects. All of those were scaled back, if made more realistic in this game. It looks fine. How does it sound then? It sounds decent. The in-game audio is all pretty good. Weapons sound powerful enough, and environmental effects are clean and clear. The slow-mo is still a highlight like it was in the first game. Everything is still sounds fine. There is nothing to complain about when you take the audio on its own. However, they did pull back on what they did in the first game. Remember how you could hear every single shell casing hit the floor in the first Fear, and how awesome it was and how much that lended to the feel of firing weapons? They didn't do that for this game, and it baffles me. It has an effect on it. The weapons are not as fun to fire as they were in the first game as a direct result. It's a little things like this that they pulled back on for some reason that result in the audio being not as good as the first game. Just like the first game, the voice acting in this game is very good across the board. Each actor does turn in a believable performance for his or her character. There really is nothing to complain about. This was well into the era where video games had figured out voice work, and it was good in this game as it was in the first game. There would be no excuse for it to be bad. Thankfully, it is not bad. The composer from the first game returns in this game, and this is definitely a good thing. The music here, while not quite as memorable as the first game, is still very good. It drives a good sense of atmosphere, which is extremely important in a horror title like this game. The music in this game is pretty good. It more than does its job, and it does have callbacks to the first game's soundtrack, as you would expect. How does it play then? In a word, it plays a lot like the first game. You shoot enemies, you use slow-mo powers to get an advantage over them, and you find various data pads and the like that give you more story to flesh out the world. You pick up health packs and use them when you feel like it. This game does make some changes to the format though. Health pickups that increase your max health are gone. Instead, they have been replaced by small health boosts that you can pick up to gain back a small amount of your own health. I like the system of increasing your max health in the first game had, and I do not know why they decided to get rid of it. Furthermore, the number of health packs that you can stack has been decreased from 10 at a time to 3. This does force you to be more careful when you are low on health, because you cannot just brute force your way through situations by spamming your health packs to keep yourself alive. This is a change that I have no problem with. You still get Reflex Boosters, however, that increase how long your slow-mo powers last. These are immensely useful and helpful when you find them, because the slow-mo is just as big of an advantage here as it was in the first game. I'm glad to see this mechanic return from the first game. Melee has been pared back as well. There are less moves that you can pull off than there were in the first game. While I did not use that very often in the first game, it was one of the more fun aspects of this game. To see it pulled back on for this release is definitely disappointing. I use it less here than I did in the first game because it just isn't as much fun as it was in 1. I swear the enemy AI does not feel as smart as it did in the first game. They still do a lot of the same things. They will hide behind cover and fire at you from it. They will try to flush you out with grenades, and they will try to sneak around you. But something about it just feels off compared to the way they acted in the first game. I have never been able to 100% pinpoint why this is, but I do have a couple of theories. First off, the enemies do not call out to each other in this game nearly as much as they did in the first game, and they are less precise when they do. This was a simple trick in the first game that was used to make enemies seem smarter than they actually were, but it is very effective. The illusion is still here, but it is so to a lesser extent in this game. This might have something to do with it. Second off, I wonder if the environments cater to the AI here as well as they did in the first game. This does have more varied environments than the first game did, but one of the reasons why the environments were kept more limited in Fear 1 was because they catered to the strengths of the AI. I wonder if this is less true in this game than it was in the first game. At the end of the day, the enemy AI is not bad by any stretch of the imagination. They are fun to fight. If this was not a sequel to the first game, it would be perfectly acceptable, but it is when you compare it to the first game that you start to question. Why does this feel a little bit off? Is this game doing something different with its AI that isn't as good? I do not have a solid answer for that. Fear 2 gets a lot of hate for being a bad sequel, but I do not think that is being fair to it. It is a good horror shooter in its own right, and it should be recognized as one. The weapons are fun to fire, the enemies are fun to fight. It just happens to live in the shadow of one of the best shooters ever made. That is its ultimate downfall. It is a fun game, but isn't as fun as the first. Here is the thing about this game. With its combat mechanics being what they are, this game is largely as fun as you make it. If you spend the entire game hiding behind obstacles and taking pot shots at the enemy, you are going to have less fun than if you go in guns blazing and using slow-mo. The latter is how Fear was designed to be played, so do not ruin the experience for yourself. What about replay value then? Well, the multiplayer is dead, which instantly hurts the game's replay value. This is not a campaign that I have felt compelled to revisit numerous times over the years like the first game either. I did enjoy it. I enjoyed revisiting it for our Let's Play, but it is also not a game that I am too eager to hop back into. For what it's worth, it does have multiple difficulty options for you to try and beat it on, so it is not completely absent of replay value. I will probably play through it again at some point in the future because it is a fun playthrough. Fear 2 Project Origin is a good game. It does not deserve the overly negative reputation that it seems to have. The reputation is mostly from people comparing it to the first game. When you take it on its own, however, there is a lot to like here. If you can play it in that mindset, you will probably have a lot of fun with Fear 2. I know I did. When I first played it years ago, I too could not help but feel underwhelmed by it. But give it another shot. Separate yourself from how good the first game is and look at Fear 2 on its own. You may find something quite enjoyable. Thank you everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed my look at Fear 2 Project Origin. This was a fun game to revisit. Have you played it? If you have, let us know your thoughts on it down below. Be sure to subscribe and ring the bell for any future updates. If you could share this video, that would help us out a lot as well. Talk to you later, everybody. Doomdog out.